various things in order to breastfeed. Not everybody is comfortable with it, but crikey, if you're comfortable with it and you're happy with it and you can do it discreetly, what is the problem?
Here's a different angle on the story. When my kids, they're much older now, but when my young fella needed changing once, I went into a parent's room and I got a bad comment from a female.
Because you're dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Shouldn't the mum been doing this?
Really?
Yeah, I think she felt uncomfortable. There you go.
Do you think times have changed?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I
Hope
think
so, yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
I remember, I was on the double-decker bus the other day watching the kids being taken along to the primary school, Northcote Primary, and just about every parent was a dad. And I thought, wow, things really have changed.
Yeah, they have.
Well, someone says back in 1974, breastfed on the Hammersmith bus in London. Come on.
Good on you.
It's 2019. The panel...
I breastfed at a netball game at a North Harbour netball game, right in the top stands. Nobody could see me.
Oh, I thought you were playing centre at the time.
Oh, no. God.
The panel, to the panel, a bit of response on the former story about sexual harassment. The panel, the sexual harassment is commonplace wherever there is public-facing work. I have experienced it often as a doctor, and I can't hide my full name. So thank you very much for your thoughts on that story. It's 4 away from 5. I did want to get to this one. We've been I wanted to talk about it for a while, but ditch the office cake and grab a banana. It's been a bit of a food theme today, so why not sort of continue on that? Actually, on that, Andrea says, my partner is vegetarian and I'm not. So we cook vegetarian at home, but I eat meat when out and about. This is exactly defines what I am. I'm not a vegetarian, but we are vegetarians at home. It took a little while to get used to, but found that replacing meat with meat-like alternatives in recipes doesn't work out very well. It's best just to go with recipes that truly make veggies the hero. Jamie Oliver's mushroom risotto is a great one. Oh, I love my risotto, eh? It has grilled mushrooms with a dash of lemon juice, which gives it a nice punch.
Yeah, I just can't figure out why a vegetarian risotto would cost you $35 though in a restaurant. I don't quite get it.
Because vegetables are so expensive.
And it takes time. I get it.
Ditch the office cake, grab a banana, an opinion piece and stuff by nutritionist Maggie Radich says our workplaces are stitching us up by giving us junk food at gatherings. She says we eat a lot because of work functions, Friday night wines, conferences, and while companies no doubt want to improve productivity, handing out junk food doesn't help. It's often, God, it sounds like RNZ, cake, sausage rolls, chips and chocolate. Maggie says it would be nice to have more food.
Can you hide that article from the office manager?
It would be nice to have food options. Why don't we swap our pastries for veggie sticks and hummus? Give up cake for fruit, dark chocolate or nuts. That's a really good thing to suggestion, isn't it, Alexia?
Yes, I suppose so.
Well, look, I work in the IT world, and most IT offices supply Coke, chocolate, and we also have fruit basket. Also, I try to order sort of healthy type food. It's normally the stuff that isn't eaten, to be honest.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there's dead carrot sticks.
And boy, sausage rolls coming out the wazoo and RNZ, eh, Alexia?
Oh, yeah. It's great.
And they're nice too, aren't they?
I virtuously gave up the pizza yesterday.
Good on you.
That was good.
Yeah. Alexia Russell, Shane Tippo, thank you very much for being with us. Checkpoint next. I'm back with the panel tomorrow, 3:45. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, is it back to the future with National's hardline approach to welfare as it unveils plans to cut beneficiary numbers, return to social investment and dock parents who don't immunise their kids? Pharmacists get the green light to give measles jabs. The abuse victim who torched his father and killed another man in revenge for his hurt. And the cover-up culture at a yogurt company that had plenty of positive listeria tests. Former Prime Minister Sir Bill English slams proposed abortion law changes as abhorrent and disgraceful. And an Auckland businessman who rorted elderly investors to fund his extravagant lifestyle checks into jail. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata tēnei. The dairy company that makes the Collective yogurts and its former directors have been fined almost $500,000 for systematically not reporting a potentially fatal listeria contamination in its manufacturing plant. For more than 4 years, until 2016, 235 positive tests for listeria were concealed in the Epicurean Dairy Limited packaging plant in West Auckland. Today in the Waitakere District Court, former director Angus Allen was sentenced and fined $54,000, and the company was fined $369,000. There's no evidence any contaminated products were sold or made available for consumption in any way. However, Gary Orr from the Ministry for Primary Industries says people could have been harmed and our international reputation seriously damaged.
The company involved was falsifying reports to avoid the costs associated with corrective action for the listeria contamination within the premises. Listeria is a potentially life-threatening illness, particularly affecting young, elderly, immunocompromised or pregnant women.
Gary Orr. A man has told the Royal Commission investigating abuse in state and faith-based care violence his whānau suffered passed down through the generations. Rawiri Waritini Kārina, a former child of the state and an expert on Māori experience of historical intergenerational trauma, is one of 28 witnesses giving evidence to the inquiry at a 2-week hearing. He said his grandfather couldn't speak English when he was taken by the state and was beaten until he learned to speak English, and his father was also beaten in care. Dr. Waritini Kārina's told the inquiry his father wasn't able to deal with the trauma, so relayed his experiences onto his whānau.
Well, our home was very abusive, extreme violence, extreme childhood trauma. I experienced flashbacks to that trauma. I would go into trance as a coping mechanism for dealing with it.
Dr. Rawiri Waritini Kārina. National is signalling a crackdown on social welfare if it's elected next year, with gang members and anti-vaxxers in its sights. The opposition party has released its social services discussion document, seeking supporters' views on policy positions and proposals. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Speaking in Christchurch, National's leader Simon Bridges told reporters he makes no apology for the party's hardline approach on welfare. The party has promised to strip gang members of their benefit unless they can prove their assets were paid for through legal means. Its discussion document also asks party members whether sole parents should be required to have their child fully immunised. Other questions include whether travel restrictions should kick in for those on the unemployment benefit after 6 months, and whether people under the age of 25 should face a time limit. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch. The head of the Pharmaceutical Society says letting pharmacists vaccinate against more illnesses would help bring up immunisation rates. The government announced today it is allowing pharmacists to administer the measles vaccine for people over 16. Ian McMichael hopes the move is at the start of allowing them to administer other vaccines where uptake is poor.
So things like whooping cough, so we run real risks amongst populations with babies around whooping cough. So we've shown, for instance, in the Waikato that by pharmacists getting funded whooping cough vaccines, it's increased immunity. So I'm sure the ministers will be keen to come and have more conversations with us about increasing the vaccination uptake with other vaccines as well.
Ian McMichael expects pharmacies will be giving out the vaccine sometime in the new year when contracts are in place between DHBs and the pharmacies. An Auckland businessman who stole about $1.5 million from elderly people to fund an extravagant lifestyle has been sent to jail for nearly 7 years. Stephen Robertson was found guilty of 23 theft, deception and dishonesty charges after a 10-week trial in the High Court at Auckland this year. He sold and then controlled trading software to mostly elderly people or those nearing retirement, stealing the money over 6 years. At his sentencing this morning, Justice Cates said Robertson had used his victims' nest eggs to fund flash cars, private jets and holidays.
They had worked hard all their lives to acquire a small nest egg. They invested with you in the hope of making a little extra money to help them in their retirement. Almost all of your victims say that they have lost trust in others as a consequence of your actions.
Justice Kate sentenced Robertson to 6 years and 8 months, of which he will serve half of before he is eligible for parole. Kiwi Rail says government money will allow it to transform the rundown hillside workshop with the hope of having up to 100 people working there again. The Regional Development Minister Shane Jones has announced nearly $20 million from the Provincial Growth Fund to upgrade the workshop. The Chief Operating Officer for Capital Projects, David Gordon, says Kiwi Rail will be able to modernise the site inside and out, including probably knocking down the warehouse that's been there since around the 1930s.
We'll need to find partners to really develop this site properly, but you won't get partners unless they're seeing you as being ready to invest as well. So it's the opportunity to do it properly, I guess, would be the best way to put it.
David Gordon says he hopes to have 100 people working there within the next 10 years. It's coming up to 6 minutes past 5. The All Blacks have made 7 changes for their final game of the World Cup, the play-off for third against Wales in Tokyo on Friday night. Skipper Kieran Reid will become the second most capped All Blacks captain when he leads the All Blacks for the 52nd time. Clay Wilson reports from Tokyo.
Midfielders Sonny Bill Williams and Ryan Crotty and outside back Ben Smith have been named to start in their final test matches. Also in his final game with the All Blacks, captain Kieran Reid will lead the team in the number 8 jersey. Lock Brodie Retallick and props Nepo Lalala and Joe Moody are the other low numbers to retain their starting spots, while Scott Barrett moves from flanker to lock. The promotions in the forwards include Dane Coles at hooker and loose forwards Sam Cane and Shannon Frizzell. Outside of Williams, Crotty and Ben Smith, young wing Rieko Ioane is elevated to start in the backs. In Tokyo, this is Clay Wilson.
Sean Johnson's dropping from the Kiwi squad for the test against Great Britain doesn't spell the end of his international rugby league career. Kiwis assistant coach Ben Gardner says Johnson's form against the Kangaroos warranted his exclusion for Saturday's game, but he expects Johnson to bounce back. Johnson is replaced in the Kiwis team by Kieran Foran, who will play his first test in more than 2 years.
It's not about moping around, it's about taking your lessons, getting better from it and moving forward. He's definitely not banished or anything like that. It's just an opportunity to give Kieran a go, and after this week's game we'll see what happens and go forward from there.
Kiwis assistant coach Ben Gardner. That's the news.
Victims support the abuse inquiry.
Yes, it's had a few bumps and bruises on the way, but I'm confident that it's back on track and needs to be supported because this is an opportunity to bring about the changes that are badly needed.
Simon Bridges wants gang members off the dole.
Either we're serious about getting at these gang members who have the assets, who have gotten gains, who aren't sitting there poor, or we're not.
But Black Power says it's all just election talk.
There's an assumption that every gang member is a criminal and every criminal is a gang member. Now, that's just not true. There's a lot of talk, and a lot of talk happened in the year leading up to election. This isn't any different.
Plenty of action. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, the good, the bad and the ugly of New Zealand business decisions with author Ralph Bathurst. And after 10, Mike Viking with tips for making happy memories. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland through to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country. Partly cloudy, a few showers in the west, clearing tomorrow morning, then mainly fine weather. For Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine but brief showers are possible tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, including Wairarapa, cloud increasing with showers tonight, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Nelson, mainly fine but a shower is possible tonight. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, showers and strong southerly spreading north this evening, possibly heavy with hail and isolated thunderstorms. Mainly fine tomorrow but a few showers for Otago and Banks Peninsula. Bulla, Westland, Fiordland and Southland, showers heavy for a time tonight with snow lowering to 900 metres in Fiordland. Southwesterly gales about southern coasts tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, a few showers but rain tomorrow morning, possibly heavy with hail. RNZ National, it's coming up to 5:09.
Thanks, Susanna, and thanks for tuning in. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. National is signalling a crackdown on social welfare if it's elected next year, with gang members and anti-vaxxers in its sights. The opposition party has released its social services discussion document, seeking the views of its supporters on policy positions and proposals. Here's our deputy political editor, Craig McCulloch.
National's latest social media ad clearly demonstrating that gangs are in the firing line. Simon Bridges today promising a crackdown, stripping gang members of their benefits unless they can prove they're not cashing in on crime.
We're not going to let them double dip and get the dole and have their ill-gotten gains. That's not right, and that's not a fair go to hard-working New Zealanders who pay their taxes.
The policy is just one of a series laid out in a discussion document which reflects a more punitive, hardline approach on welfare. Among the commitments, the reinstatement of scrapped sanctions, including the penalty on single mums who don't name their child's father. The party would also see teen beneficiaries put on money management schemes with their rent and bills automatically deducted from their benefit.
Because I don't think anyone in New Zealand wants to see benefits as a long-term option.
Other ideas have also been floated as questions for National supporters. Should there be a time limit on the dole for people under the age of 25? And another, should solo parents be required to fully immunise their children?
There is no good reason not to immunise your child in 2019. The evidence is out and it's clear. So if you don't want to vaccinate your child, well, here's the thing, don't take taxpayers' money.
Mr Bridges making his position crystal clear. It would be a significant shift for National to adopt a no jab, no pay policy. It opted against one in 2012, with Paula Bennett at the time saying it could breach the Bill of Rights. John Key ruled it out again in 2015, when Australia introduced a similar scheme. Indeed, as recently as last month, National MP Shane Retty said the policy was too intrusive and would hurt the poor. Mr Bridges clearly with a different view.
The Bill of Rights is not meant to be a handcuff on governments to make decisions and value judgments about what's important.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern recently shot down the prospect of any such policy while she's in charge. And Helen Petusis-Harris, a vaccinologist at Auckland University, says it's not the right move, that first the government should make vaccines easily accessible.
Maybe we better be looking at that first rather than trying to bring in some slightly more draconian measures.
Auckland Action Against Poverty says children should not be punished for the decisions of their parents. Its spokesperson, Ricardo Mendes-March, says the opposition is simply engaging in dog whistle politics.
What I see in this document is nothing more than prejudiced and out-of-touch rhetoric that will do nothing but increase poverty in the country.
The government has labelled the proposals desperate political grandstanding and a collection of reheated old ideas. But the rhetoric's far from over. National signalled more to come, with its wider gang plan due out before next year's election. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
The Royal Commission into Abuse in State and Faith-Based Care has today heard from a man so affected by abuse that he set fire to his sleeping father and later in life killed a man in revenge for his hurt. 28 witnesses are currently given evidence in a 2-week hearing in Auckland. Dr. Rawiri Waretini Karina is a former child of the state. He detailed his whānau's forced separation from Māori culture over generations and the abuse he endured as a child. Katie Scotcher is covering the hearing and filed this report, and just a warning, some people might find this story upsetting.
Dr. Rawiri Waretini Karina is an expert on the Māori experience of historical intergenerational trauma, and the seeds of his own trauma were sown generations ago. His grandfather, who only spoke Māori, was taken by the state in 1930 and beaten until he learned to speak English. His father was taken by social welfare officers in 1954 and also beaten. Dr. Waretini Karina told the inquiry his father passed on the same abuse that he received and it impacted the whole whānau.
Well, our home was very abusive, extreme violence, extreme childhood trauma. I experienced flashbacks to that trauma. I would go into trance as a coping mechanism for dealing with it.
Dr. Waretini Karina was taken to the state-run Hamilton Receiving Home for Boys, or Tower Hill, when he was 5 years old. After living there for a year without suffering abuse, his parents took him back home where he met his 1-year-old younger brother. He told the inquiry how he was often left to care for his brother.
I knew I had to look after my brother, but I wanted to go out and play with the neighbours. So I put him out on the porch just so I can keep an eye on him. and I went out and played. I got so engrossed in playing with my friends and neighbours, and I didn't notice that it started raining again. It was only when I heard my little brother crying that I realised that he was getting wet.
He took the baby inside and dried him off, but he caught the flu and died days later, prompting his father to blame him and beat him. Dr. Waretini Karena told the inquiry he was taken back to Tower Hill months later after another violent episode at home.
When he was assaulting my mother, something in me just snapped, and I just remember yelling at him, and then he started hitting me. My mum got in between and he knocked him unconscious. He was asleep in the bedroom, and I set the bed on fire within a minute.
From then on, he was bullied and abused in state homes and detention centres, and even by foster parents. He told the inquiry he struggled to deal with the trauma, and his anger boiled over when he heard about the recent abuse of a 5-year-old boy. The mother of the boy had told him that the father was the abuser, so he took matters into his own hands.
He told us more about what was happening to his son. That was the time when I realised, on reflection, I was carrying my own psychological baggage. I didn't even know I had it. But hearing that story impacted me to such a degree. I ended up superimposing my own story, my own history over the boy to such a degree. I went and I fought and I killed his father.
He was convicted of the man's murder and later found out the mother had lied about the father's involvement in the abuse. Dr. Waretini Karena spent 10 years behind bars with 6 other Māori men who grew up in state care. He told the inquiry after his release he went on to explore his culture and heritage, going on to earn a PhD and became a lecturer and researcher for the Māori King. He says the solutions to the current problems facing Māori can and must be found within Māoridom.
Māori need space to take care of their own. I believe we have the capacity to do it. And that's why I advocate that our people work with our people to heal our people.
The inquiry also heard today from some who suffered from the colonial attitude that Māori could not take care of their own. Dr. Alison Green was removed from her whānau as a baby and adopted by a Pākehā couple in 1958. She says her adopted mother was told to tell her she was Spanish because if she grew up Māori, her outcomes would be much worse. Dr. Green says she has spent her lifetime rediscovering her identity.
There is a belief in this country that when children are removed and raised by somebody else, that they will become somebody else. I can tell you that is not so.
The hearing in Auckland will resume tomorrow. I tamaki makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
The company behind the Collective brand of dairy products has been fined nearly $500,000 for covering up positive tests for the potentially fatal bacteria Listeria. Epicurean Dairy makes yoghurt, including products specifically marketed to kids. The company's former general manager, Angus Allen, pleaded guilty to 10 charges in the Waitakere District Court. Another former employee has also been convicted of 5 charges of withholding positive Listeria tests. The Ministry of Primary Industry started investigating following a tip-off. Gary Orr is the Director of Compliance for MPI and joins me now. Good evening. Can you tell us exactly what was going on here? What were they doing?
Good evening, Lisa. Look, this was sustained, blatant, deliberate deception over a number of years. Auditors were being deceived and official reports were being falsified. And basically it boiled down to the company was falsifying positive Listeria test results, and we believe that was to avoid the costs associated with fixing the problem that caused those positive results.
So what are they supposed to do when they get a positive Listeria test?
It's supposed to be notified to us that, Listeria is a potentially life-threatening illness, as you've identified. People at risk from Listeria are the young, the elderly, immunocompromised and pregnant women, and people can die from it. So we treat it very seriously, and we need to know immediately that positive tests are identified.
So over what period of time did this go on for, and how many positive tests went unreported that you know of?
It went on over a 4-year period between 2012 and 2016 before it was brought to our attention. And there was, as you you've rightly identified, around 200 positive tests during that time. The good thing is, and this is more by good luck than good management, is that the tests were associated with the environment that the products were being manufactured in and not the products themselves.
So what do you mean? Where was it coming from?
We believe it was the floor that was at fault, and it's worthy of note that within a couple of months of us commencing the investigation, significant work was done on the premises to fix that, and the positive test results have now gone.
So, just generally speaking, you got a tip-off. How did that come to your attention and when exactly?
We got that in 2016, and I really sort of don't want to go into how we got it, other than to say I applaud the courage of the individual concerned in bringing it to our attention. These things are incredibly difficult to detect where there is an orchestrated deception involved, where auditors and verifiers are being lied to and documents are being altered. So we're incredibly grateful that it was brought to our attention, and then as soon as it was, we started the investigation.
I know you don't want to identify this person, but were they within this company somewhere?
They were sufficiently involved that they had credible information about the level of offending.
Okay, so how widespread was the knowledge about this cover-up? Because that's what it was. So within the company, how many people would have been in the know?
Well, as you've pointed out, there were 2 people charged. We believe that Mr. Pizanoff, as the operations manager, was clearly, his fingerprints were all over the offending. But the other side of it too is that Mr. Allen, as the general manager, this sends a message to all those in a position of responsibility in such companies that whilst you trust your staff, you have to verify. So you have to actually dig down. You have to audit yourself every now and then to make sure that what you're being told is accurate and the truth. And if not, then you could be potentially liable, as he was in this case.
So was the auditing process strong enough if the doctored records as such managed to get through? Nobody picked up until you got a tip-off.
Yeah, look, that's one of the biggest problems with this type of thing, and luckily it's pretty rare that we have this level of deception, but we learn from that every time we have a case like this, and we feed that information back to the auditors and the verifiers, and we sort of point them in the direction of things that they should be looking for, questions they should be asking, and conversations they should be having with the testing laboratories to make sure that they are being told the truth.
So did any contaminated product make it onto shelves?
No, and that again, as I say, is more by good luck than good management.
How do you know that? How can you explain to us how you know that no contaminated product made it out there to consumers?
Because the product is all tested before release, and there was only one test result that came through as a positive related to illegal foods. That was before that had been released onto the market, and that was withheld and destroyed.
You've got a slightly dodgy phone line there, but I just want to make the distinction. So when you say that there were over 200 positive listeria tests, was this not actually in the yoghurt product that was intended for the shelves?
No, it was in the environment. So we believe it related to a damaged floor in the production area of the company, and as I say, within 2 months of us commencing the investigation, remedial action was taken in the factory, and the tests, the positive results, immediately dropped off.
So in terms of that, are they required to swab appliances as well as check product?
Absolutely, because that's how seriously we view listeria in food production premises. It's not just the presence of it in the product itself, but they have to ensure that the environment is sufficiently sanitised to prevent it transferring into products.
You've touched on this, the money aspect of it, the suspicion that they just didn't want to fix things up. But did they give you any direct insight into their motivations here?
No. We've just sort of inferred from the fact that nothing was done, that they didn't want to stop production because that's obviously going to have a significant impact on the company, and they didn't want to spend the money on fixing the floor. That's something that we were advised by one of the persons charged, that he believes that was the reason, and we have nothing to discount that.
Just before you go, almost $500,000. I mean, where does this sit in terms of court outcomes for you?
Oh, look, I'm delighted with the penalty. It's the most significant penalty imposed for Animal Products Act offending ever. So I think it sends a very strong message to anybody that's considering this type of deception that there will be a price to pay.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Gary Orr from MPI talking there about the company that makes the collective brand of dairy products. The company and some former directors have faced a pretty hefty fine there for covering up positive listeria tests. It is 25 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know what you reckon about National's welfare discussion document and its plans to, get tough on beneficiaries if it's re-elected. 2101 on the text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Saveloys, marshmallows and whole grapes are among foods the Health Ministry says are too dangerous to serve under 5s in early childhood centres. Draft guidelines say such foods pose a high risk of choking small children and centres should not serve them. Now the Education Ministry is considering making that advice mandatory to minimise the risk of tragic accidents. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen and videographer Dom Thomas went to a Wellington centre to find out what impact a ban would have.
It's lunchtime at Adelaide Early Childhood Centre in Wellington, and these under 5s have brought their own food from home.
Look what's in my lunchbox.
What's in your lunchbox?
Hummus. Yogurt. Cucumber. Cucumber. Sandwiches. I ate already. And kiwi fruit. And that's it.
But there are a few items that are on the Health Ministry's list of high-risk foods. Uncut grapes, rice crackers, whole nuts, apples that haven't been grated or cut into thin slices. The Ministry says those foods can choke small children who have small air and food passages and have not yet learned to chew properly. These littlies say they wouldn't like a ban on foods like chippies and sausages.
Oh, not like it, and it will be terrible. It would be terrible.
But the risk is real. In 2016, a 22-month-old suffered severe brain damage when he choked on an apple, and several choking incidents have been reported to the Education Ministry since then. The head teacher at Adelaide, Karen O'Leary, says choking is a hazard, but she wonders if the regulations are too prescriptive.
First and foremost, obviously no one wants to see any children choking in an early childhood environment. So there absolutely needs to be measures in place to try and minimise and mitigate the risk of that happening. However, I do worry that the guidelines around some of these food suggestions are taking it a little bit too far and just are not practicable in an early childhood environment.
Karen O'Leary says many of the foods listed as high risk appear in lunchboxes at Adelaide every day. Despite that, she says incidents of choking have been extremely rare.
I've been here for 19 years now, and I can remember one food choking and one marble getting stuck, but it was both of which were extricated very quickly because teachers were on hand.
Can you remember what the food was?
Apple.
Te Rito Maioha represents about 600 early childhood centres, and its chief executive, Kathy Wolfe, says they're likely to have mixed views on the proposed regulations.
Some will say they're not particularly happy, and others are saying, well, they're doing it anyway. I think the sector just feeling, a bit of pressure in terms of more regulation and compliance and just getting a little bit concerned about the policing of food safety. But at the end of the day, for us, it's about making sure that children are safe.
The Education Ministry is consulting on the proposed rules until November the 15th. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
And if you were listening to that, you can check it out online on Facebook and our webpage and see some of those littlies' reckons about what they do and don't like in their lunchboxes. The English rugby team has been fined for its flying V response to the All Blacks semi-final haka at the weekend. But a kapa haka expert here says World Rugby is being petty and over the top. Our reporter Robin Martin has more.
The All Blacks playing right to left as you watch at home, and they will line up now with their captain at the front. And England have responded in a way I have never seen before.
World Rugby were quick to post news of what it called England's incredible response to the haka, but then changed its tune and fined them a four-figure sum. In 2011, the French were pinged $4,300 for a similar stunt at the World Cup final in Auckland. Back in 1996, the Wallabies enraged many New Zealanders at a Wellington test, turning their back on the haka and warming up at the other end of Athletic Park. But Wetini Mitai Ngātai, who has coached the All Blacks in the art of kapa haka, says he was caught off guard by the English response to kapa o pango, but says it wasn't disrespectful.
To be honest, I didn't know what the hell they were doing. I thought they were adopting one of our Māori battle formations, which is a battle formation, that one. It's called an open guard, open V. But, I just thought, they've learned something from us because, I thought that was cool, actually. Yeah, it was a good response.
World Rugby dictates that teams facing the haka must stay at least 10 metres on their own side of the halfway line. The point of the English V was the only part of the formation that far back, and at least 4 players were on the All Blacks side of the field, prompting the referees to usher them back. But Mr Mitai Ngātai says the response didn't break with tikanga and wasn't offensive.
Oh, no, absolutely not. No, you're being challenged. For goodness sake, you don't sit down and fold your arms and cross your legs. You stand up in some way, and I think that was a good way of retaliating that challenge. I think it was a good way. I thought it was a Māori way too.
Mr Mitai Ngātai says the All Blacks he knows would not have been rattled by the response to the haka. Veteran broadcaster Keith Quinn thought the flying V added to an exhilarating spectacle.
And I wondered what they were going to do next. I actually thought they might completely encircle the All Blacks haka. I thought it was a thrilling response. I didn't think it in any way disrespectful. I thought this is them being somewhat sensational before the kick-off, and why not?
Mr Quinn says he's aware of World Rugby's rule, but he can't see the point in fining the English.
I don't understand why they've been fined. In the end, did they do any harm? I think it just created a high level of excitement before the kick-off. And I thought it was terrific. It really sent a tingle down my spine.
In post-match interviews, England's Samoan-born centre, Manu Tuirangi, said it was coach Eddie Jones who came up with the idea.
Just hopefully show that, we're ready to accept the challenge and we're ready to take the All Blacks head on. It's always an honour. It's always, I respect the haka and it gets you pumped up.
While England skipper Owen Farrell, who famously smirked through the haka, appeared to know the protocols.
We knew we had to be within a radius behind them, and we wanted to not just stand there and let them come at us. We wanted to keep a respectful distance and be respectful to that, but we didn't want to just stand in a flat line, letting them come at us.
All Black skipper Kieran Reid says England's response to the haka had no bearing on the outcome of the game, but punters here are divided over whether England should be fined.
There's a lot of tikanga behind the haka, and I reckon they shouldn't step on that sort of protocol.
They shouldn't have gone over halfway, and the French got fined in 2.11 for it, so yeah, fair enough.
I thought it was good. It's their way of challenging us, so we'll do our whittle and do our challenge, and then the opponent will come do their challenge, so it's all good.
I suppose it is disrespectful in itself, but that's life, isn't it?
The All Blacks face Wales in the bronze final on Friday. Back in 2008 in Cardiff, the two teams refused to move in a tense standoff after the haka. Plenty of fans will be watching to see whether or not the Welsh intend to take a leaf from the English in the pre-game rituals. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Robin Martin ahau.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National. An Auckland businessman who ripped off investors' savings is jailed for nearly 7 years. The study that suggests giving birth at home is just as safe as hospital, and pharmacists want to be able to vaccinate before a disease outbreak hits. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program today. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A little late with the headlines, but here's Susanna.
The dairy products company, The Collective, and its former directors have been fined over $400,000 for not reporting a potentially fatal listeria contamination in its manufacturing plant. For more than 4 years, 235 positive tests for listeria were concealed at a packaging plant in Auckland. Today in the Waitakere District Court, former director Angus Allen was sentenced and fined $54,000, and the company was fined $369,000. Nationals leader Simon Bridges has endorsed a no jab, no pay policy in which solo parents would have to immunise their children if they want to receive welfare. The party is sounding out the idea with its supporters as part of its social services discussion document. A man has told the Royal Commission investigating abuse in state and faith-based care, violence that his whānau suffered passed down through the generations. Rawiri Waratini Kārena says his grandfather and father were beaten in state care. He told the inquiry his father relayed his experiences onto his whānau, beating his wife and child. Dr. Waratini Kārena says he was also bullied and abused in state care. National MP Michael Woodhouse is questioning the need to re-establish the Hillside Workshop to service Kiwi rail trains. The re-establishment was announced today by the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones as part of a $50 million cash injection for Dunedin-based projects. But Mr Woodhouse says the government needs to explain how the Hillside Workshop, which was unsustainable for a generation, will work in the future. In sport, the All Blacks have made 7 changes for their final game of the World Cup, the play-off for third against Wales in Tokyo on Friday. Ben Smith, Rico Ioane, Ryan Crotty and Shannon Frizzell, who were all left out of the match day 23 for last week's semi-final, have been recalled to the starting lineup, while Dane Coles, Sam Cane and Sonny Bill Williams will also start against Wales on Friday. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time for business now, and Nona Peltier joins us in the studio. Nona, so hot off the press, excuse the pun that's coming up, Freightways going to buy Big Chill Distribution. So what is this, a frozen foods, transport food?
Yeah, it is. It's an express distribution network with some 200 vehicles. They've got depots and cold storage all across the country. Big network. And so Freightways, which is sort of a similar type of company, they have courier services and that sort of thing, also have other businesses in Australia. They're going to buy this company for $117 million. That's for the first 80% of the company. They're going to buy the whole thing, subject to approval by the overseas.
It's staged, is it?
Yeah. Then they're going to buy another 20% depending on how the company performs, so that bit of it is performance-based. So it's subject to Overseas Investment Office approval. But overall, it's something that the company is sort of liking to put another string on its bow. And it's a big company, Freightways, not as big as some, but fairly large. And they've got, like I said, a big courier service as well. And they've got data businesses in Australia.
So they obviously see a market in, well, the food arm of distribution.
Chilled and frozen food.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's move on to this peer-to-peer lender, Harmony. Raising $47 million for expansion. So what's it going to do with all of that?
They're going to spend the money in Australia. So they're going to spend it over there. But they raised, $25 million from private investors. Well, private investors. 2 new big investors. One is a private equity firm and the other one is a, private institutional investor. No name given. But anyway, it's $25 million from those 2 big investors, which is what they wanted. They wanted to add to their portfolio in terms of who owns the company. It's good for liquidity and so on. They're partly owned by Heartland Bank as well as Trade Me. And so their plan now is to expand. They found some really good business here in New Zealand. They want to take that to Australia. They've also raised another $22 million of debt. So overall, it's a $47 million access. They're going to use that to build their business there.
And what else has been going on in the markets today?
Well, I have to say the markets, I don't know if I want to use the word pensive, but awaiting fresh economic news from, you know it, the United States. Yes, the central bank, the world's most powerful central bank, the U.S. Federal Reserve, is going to tell us what they're going to do with interest rates tomorrow. Could be that they raise them, they could be lowering them, but bets are definitely on a cut of a quarter basis point. So that's 0.25%.
So what's that done to your numbers, Nona?
Not very much. And that's partly because no one knows for sure what else the U.S. Federal Reserve might say about which way the economy is going in the U.S. And the on-again, off-again trade talks with China and the United States don't, right at the moment they look a little bit down. So upsy-downsy again. And so the market's sitting there going, what should we do? Apparently not very much. So we fell another handful of points, down 4. So yesterday we were up 5. Today we're down 4. 10,790. And the dollar is trading at 63.5 U.S. cents, 92.6 Australian, and 49.4 pence. So really hardly any change.
So news of an election didn't do much for the Brits then either.
No, everything's just waiting.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Pelsier with our business news. An Auckland businessman has been jailed for nearly 7 years for ripping off investors to the tune of more than $1.5 million to fund an extravagant lifestyle. Stephen Robertson was found guilty of 38 theft, deception and dishonesty charges after a 10-week trial in the High Court in Auckland. His mainly elderly victims lost their life savings and in some cases have been forced to postpone their retirement and to remortgage their properties. Our court reporter Annika Smith was at his sentencing today.
Auckland businessman Stephen Robertson was given more than $1 million to trade on his investors' behalf. Instead, he used it to fund an extravagant lifestyle, fitted out with flash cars, private jets, holidays and jewellery. The luxuries were funded by his 22 victims, most of them elderly or nearing retirement. Justice Kate said the victim impact statements made for sad reading.
They had worked hard all their lives to acquire a small nest egg. They invested with you in the hope of making a little extra money to help them in their retirement. Almost all of your victims say that they have lost trust in others as a consequence of your actions.
In August, Justice Cates found Robertson guilty of a raft of charges after a 10-week judge-alone trial. They included 23 charges of theft by person in a special relationship, 11 of obtaining by deception, and 4 of dishonestly using a document. The judge found he stole $1.2 million and roughly 270,000 Australian dollars between 2009 and 2015 through several software companies. He sold software that purported to help people trade, but it wasn't easy to use, and when confronted with disgruntled investors, Robertson offered to trade on their behalf. Instead of actually trading the money, he used it to fund a lavish lifestyle. And when he ran out of money, he simply dipped into clients' credit card accounts for more. Justice Kate said Robertson had targeted elderly, unsophisticated and vulnerable victims.
You were clearly an extremely skilled and persuasive salesman who used your considerable skills to deceive and steal from honest and trusting clients.
The court heard many of his victims had lost nest eggs they had worked their entire life to secure. One man in his 70s, on the verge of retirement, is now still working, and another man in his 60s has been forced to remortgage his farm. Crown Prosecutor Ben Finn said Robertson's victims were devastated. He said the defendant should not get a discount for previous good character, as it was this character he used to exploit his victims.
Many of the investors, when they gave evidence at trial and in their victim impact statements, say same things. That's how Mr. Robertson held himself out to them. His intelligence, his charisma and his attentiveness were the very qualities that enabled him to persuade these people to part with their money.
Mr. Finn said a 7-year jail term was appropriate, but Robertson's lawyer, Todd Simmons, said the offending wasn't overly sophisticated and warranted a lower starting point of 6 years.
It certainly isn't, in my submission, when one compares cases of significant fraudulent offending that come before this court, involving, as they do very often, multiple offenders.
Mr Simmons said his client was remorseful, posed a low risk of reoffending, and there was still a hopeful prospect of reparation funds, given Robertson's assets were being liquidated. Justice Cates adopted a starting point of 7 years imprisonment and granted a 4-month discount for Robertson's remorse and willingness to make reparations. After the sentencing, FMA Head of Enforcement, Karen Chang, said it reflected not just the impact on the victims, but the financial markets.
This sort of conduct impacts on the integrity and the reputation of New Zealand's financial markets. And that's the reason why we took action in this case. Just bear in mind, Mr Robertson, he wasn't a registered or an authorised financial advisor. But from the point of view of the victims, they thought that they were participating in the financial sector.
Justice Cates sentenced Robertson to 6 years and 8 months in jail. He will serve half that time behind bars before he is eligible for parole. Ātui te ko te matua ko Annika Smith aho.
Pharmacists say letting them do vaccinations generally, not just in a crisis, would be a good way of preventing future outbreaks of sickness and disease. 840 pharmacists across 450 pharmacies are trained to deliver vaccinations and have today been told they'll be able to immunise against measles. This year there's been almost 2,000 confirmed cases of the virus. Emma Hatton reports.
People over 16 will soon be able to walk into a pharmacy and get the MMR vaccine. The country is in the midst of a measles outbreak, and the Associate Health Minister says the move is aimed at improving herd immunity. Julianne Genter hopes letting pharmacists give out the vaccine will prompt those in their mid-teens to late 20s who may not be fully immunised and don't regularly visit a GP to get a move on.
Now that the curve is coming down and cases are reducing, we can move to the next phase, which is closing the immunity gap in that 16 to 29-year-old group. But of course, children and maintaining that schedule is still a major priority for government.
She says it's taken some time to work through the logistics of such a policy, like ensuring pharmacists get paid for doing it, giving them access to the National Register, and managing supply of the vaccine. A Wellington pharmacist, Sasha Jakes, says staff are keen to get started. She says a lot of customers have asked whether they can get a vaccine through her clinic and expects there will be good uptake.
Well, we noticed even with the flu vaccinations when it became fully funded, it was just amazing how many more people came in simply because of that.
These shoppers near the pharmacy in Kilburnie agree.
Absolutely. Much convenient and easy.
If I don't go to the doctor, I go to the pharmacy for it. So I find that very convenient,
I've just moved here to Wellington. It's so hard to get a doctor's appointment really anywhere. So, if you could just get more stuff done at your local pharmacist, then that's way easier.
And with it expected to be a popular option, Sasha Jakes is hopeful the supply will be well managed.
I guess there always is that concern because we had that concern with the flu vaccinations, but we've been told today that there is a supply coming in, so I'm confident that we will be given sufficient supplies.
The head of the Pharmaceutical Society, Ian McMichael, says pharmacists pride themselves on being accessible and hopes the move is the start of allowing them to administer other vaccines where uptake is poor.
So things like whooping cough, so we run real risks amongst populations with babies around whooping cough. So we've shown, for instance, in the Waikato that by pharmacists getting funded whooping cough vaccines, it's increased immunity. So I'm sure the ministers will be keen to come and have more conversations with us about increasing the vaccination uptake with other vaccines as well.
Mr McMichael expects pharmacies will be giving out the vaccine sometime in the new year. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
More than 1 million Californians are without power or bracing for more sweeping blackouts as utility companies try to reduce the risk of bushfires. High winds are forecast and 2 major blazes are already burning at either end of the state. The outages are a controversial tactic that have been used a few times already this year, infuriating customers and California's governor. The ABC's James Glenday reports.
Fanned by strong winds, flames swept through the star-studded hills of Los Angeles, threatening some of the most expensive real estate in the city and forcing thousands to flee in the middle of the night. Among them were actor-turned-politician Arnold Schwarzenegger and basketball star LeBron James.
I hadn't been in a fire drill since like the 7th grade. Just challenging, at that hour, getting my family, getting my kids and everybody having to evacuate at such a a rapid rate. You don't have much time to really think about what you can get or what you can do. You just got to get out.
2 hours drive from San Francisco, another larger blaze has ravaged some 50,000 acres of land. More high winds are forecast late into the evening, which has firefighters in the north and south of California worried, and a state of emergency has been declared.
It only takes one ember to blow downwind to start another fire. Embers have been known to travel several miles. So we're very concerned about tonight's wind event.
As a precaution, utility firm Pacific Gas and Electric has shut off power again in several places to try to stop downed and damaged lines triggering bushfires. More than 1 million people are expected to be affected. The blackouts are a new tactic and very controversial. A much bigger shutdown at the weekend affected some 2.5 million people, causing food to spoil and businesses to close. And earlier this month, hundreds of thousands of others dealt with much the same thing, which infuriated Governor Gavin Newsom, who claimed corporate greed and a lack of investment was solely to blame.
That greed has precipitated in a lack of intentionality and focus on hardening their grid, undergrounding their transmission lines. They simply did not do their job.
In January, Pacific Gas and Electric filed for bankruptcy after facing hundreds of lawsuits from bushfire victims in 2017 and 2018. It rejects suggestions it's triggering the blackouts to avoid further financial exposure. Fortunately, Ryan Walbron from the National Weather Service says the winds will soon pass.
So we're in this critical, really 24-hour window. We're hopeful that the winds will ease off after midnight tonight. The good news is after we get through this wind event, things do look favourable for the next 5 to 7 days.
But authorities do warn these events will become more common in California, and the peak of the fire season is far from over.
James Glenday there. It is 9 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. One of the most tumultuous years in British politics will now end with a snap general election. After 3 false starts, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has finally convinced the House of Commons to support an early poll on the 12th of December. Mr Johnson hopes the election will give him a fresh mandate for his Brexit deal and break the current parliamentary deadlock, which has led to the UK's exit being further delayed till the end of January. The BBC's Laura Koonsberg reports.
Order! Order!
The howls and the rage of a house divided. They'll be replaced with some new voices. Some here will disappear.
I call the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
But it's never been that straightforward with this group of MPs, as the still new Prime Minister knows to his cost.
There is only one way to restore the esteem in which our democracy is held, and to recover the respect in which Parliament should be held by the people of this country, and that is finally to offer ourselves to the judgment of the people of this country, and I commend this bill.
Labour had said no 3 times already, but this morning they were up for the rallies and the photo ops of a campaign, ready after weeks of refusing for the first December election in nearly 100 years.
We're going out there to fight an election campaign, and I can't wait to get out there on the streets. In every town and village in this country, Labour will be there giving a message of real hope where this government offers nothing.
Labour only in line because the smaller parties changed tack. The SNP and the Lib Dems reckon now the EU is back to delay to Brexit. Their best chance of stopping our departure is that election. If you'd heard them earlier, you might have imagined it was underway already.
As a united kingdom, family of nations, strong together, working within the EU, we can reshape our economy and harness the technological revolution and build a brighter future. And that's the message the Liberal Democrats will be taking to the country in this general election.
Order. Those backing a trip to the ballot box won the day.
The ayes to the right, 438. The noes to the left, 20.
Barring something strange happening in the House of Lords tomorrow, the election will be on the 12th of December, giving the Prime Minister his way, giving all of us the chance to say who will come here, which MPs, which parties will have the job of unfurling the tangle of the last few years. Who will be the Prime Minister who defines what happens next?
Laura Koonsberg reporting. A first-of-its-kind study in Australia suggests that for low-risk pregnancies, giving birth at home is just as safe as in hospital. The research, which looked at more than 1 million births across the country, has been published in the British Medical Journal. They found that for low-risk pregnancies, there were fewer complications with home births than with hospital deliveries, as the ABC's Julia Holman found out.
Push. 1, 2, 3. One more big push. Good.
Like in the movies, most Australian women have their babies in hospitals. But a new study suggests it's no riskier to have a planned home birth than to do it in the labour ward.
Essentially, we found that for healthy women, what we call low-risk women, giving birth in the right circumstances, at home, in the birth centre, in hospital, the rates of risks are very low.
The study's lead author, Professor Caroline Homer from the University of Technology, Sydney, says home births are associated with fewer incidents of induced labour, epidural, vacuum or forceps delivery and C-sections. And there are no difference in the death rates for babies born at hospitals compared with those born at home or in midwife-run birth centres.
So 8,000 home births over a 13-year period. There were 9 deaths in the home birth group. So statistically, there's no difference between giving birth at home or in hospital.
The study looked at 1.25 million births over 13 years. Nationwide, fewer than 0.3% of births take place at the home, and Professor Homer says one reason is that it's very difficult to access a private midwife.
We probably have less than 200 midwives across the country, privately practicing midwives who attend home births. There are about 14 public services across the country.
Dr. Melanie Jackson's a private midwife and has provided home births for a decade. She completed her PhD into births outside the regular hospital system.
I'm quite busy, so I usually are fully booked each month and actually turn women away. So I can't actually meet the demand for women that are coming wanting a home birth.
And you've actually got a client who's in labour right now.
Yes, I do. She rang me this morning. I'm not with her. She rang me this morning and is quite fine and happy to carry on. And then she's just going to ring me when she feels like she needs me.
Dr. Jackson says many women can't access the care they need to have a home birth.
The cost is quite prohibitive. A portion of it is covered on Medicare, but the bulk of it, about 3/4 of the cost, ends up falling to the woman.
And how much out of pocket are women usually when they have a home birth?
Around $4,000 out of pocket.
And she believes home births carry an unfair stigma.
I think the stigma comes from a lack of understanding about what home birth involves. I think people assume that sometimes that women actually haven't got care and that they're doing it without a care provider. And for so long, we've been told that hospital's a safe place. And so people will instinctively believe that home is not the safe place. I think it's probably ignorance about home birth that leads a lot of people to fear it.
While some midwives want home births to be made more available, doctors are wary.
I can tell you from personal experience on a daily basis, things go wrong. And when they go wrong in a hurry. You have minutes to do something to give that child its full potential for the rest of its life.
Dr. Michael Gannon is a Perth obstetrician and gynaecologist and the former head of the Australian Medical Association.
I spend just about every day of my life on a labour ward, and I find the prospect of having to deliver babies, even with the skills I have in the home setting, or for that matter in the birth centre setting, without the team of midwives, anaesthetists, paediatricians, other health experts around me, thoroughly terrifying. I think that there's probably a perception amongst people that it only goes wrong occasionally, but what you might call near misses are common enough. The system we have in Australia, where just short of 99% of babies are born in hospital, is one of the safest in the world. We've got to be very careful not to throw that out.
And that was Dr. Michael Gannon ending that report from the ABC's Julia Holman. Time for your feedback now on the haka and the fine for the English team. Robin's got in touch to say how ridiculous to fine the English team for the way they faced the Māori challenge. We as a national team are always free to present the haka challenge and any response should be treated in the same way. Disrespectful, he says? piffle. On National's welfare discussion document, lots of feedback on that. Typical National Party, this person says, right-wing virtue signalling, bashing beneficiaries who won't vote for them anyway while they do nothing to protect New Zealand against tax cheats. Chris from Dunedin says National should save on administration costs and just bring back poor houses. And this one along the same vein, if Simon Bridges was really serious about raising immunisation levels, why not make school enrolment dependent on vaccination? Let's punish all anti-vaxxers equally, not merely those who are on a benefit. But Tom from Waitakere says, kia ora, Lisa, I completely agree with and applaud National's proposed beneficiary policies. Having employed numerous beneficiaries, I've noticed a sense of entitlement which results in a poor work ethic. There is a lack of awareness that their welfare is being paid by hard-working mums and dads of this country, and this needs to change. Thanks, Tom. I'll be talking to Simon Bridges after the 6 o'clock news. This, though, on choking hazards and banning food at some childcare centres. Mike says the biggest cause of accidents at preschool is gravity. Time to ban that.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Ministry for Primary Industries says a tip-off from a confidential informant prompted an investigation that uncovered deliberate and repeated failures to report positive listeria results. Epicurean Dairy Limited, whose products include the Collective yogurt brand, and 2 former company directors, admitted charges over the failures. Today in the Waitakere District Court, Angus Allen was fined $54,000 and the company $369,000. Another former director was sentenced previously. Gary Orr from the ministry says 190 positive test results went unreported between 2012 and 2016. He told Checkpoint they were all done in an area of the company's factory where the floor was cracked.
The company was falsifying positive listeria test results, and we believe that was to avoid the costs associated with fixing the problem that caused those positive results.
The bacterial illness can be very serious for pregnant women and people with impaired immune systems. The lobby group Auckland Action Against Poverty has denounced National's hardline approach on social welfare as beneficiary bashing politics. The opposition party has floated a range of tough policy proposals, including a sanction for solo parents who don't immunise their children and a time limit for young people on the dole. Auckland Action Against Poverty spokesperson Ricardo Menendez-March says families will suffer.
What I see in this document is nothing more than prejudiced and out-of-touch rhetoric that will do nothing but increase poverty in the country.
Ricardo Menendez-March says National's approach is disconnected from the realities of life faced by those living on the breadline. A man has told the Royal Commission investigating abuse in state and faith-based care, violence that his whānau suffered passed down through the generations. Rawiri Waratini Kārina, a former ward of the state and an expert on the Māori experience of historical intergenerational trauma, is one of 28 witnesses giving evidence to the inquiry at a 2-week hearing. Katie Scotcher reports.
Dr. Waretini Kārina said his grandfather couldn't speak English when he was taken by the state and was beaten until he learned to speak the language, and his father was also beaten in care. He told the inquiry his father wasn't able to deal with the trauma, so relayed his experiences onto his whānau, beating his wife and child. Dr. Waretini Kārina said he was also placed in state care and was bullied and abused in state homes, detention centres and even by foster parents. Ko Katie Scotcher aho.
Government ministers have been forced to release more details from a letter they've refused to make public regarding Wellington's transport plan. But the Chief Ombudsman has backed the decision of Associate Transport Minister Julianne Genter not to make the letter itself public. National's been pushing her to release her May letter to the Transport Minister Phil Twyford, claiming it will show she pressured him to delay a proposed second Mount Victoria tunnel. Extra information released today says Ms Genter told him she was comfortable supporting the package if a number of issues were addressed, including prioritising work on rapid transit ahead of the second Mount Victoria tunnel. National's Chris Bishop says that shows his past concerns were valid.
She should just be upfront about the fact that the Green Party exerted influence to make sure that the second Mount Vic tunnel has been pushed to 2030 or beyond, and rapid transit comes first.
Chris Bishop from National. National MP Michael Woodhouse is questioning the need to re-establish the Hillside Workshop to service Kiwi rail trains. The re-establishment was announced today by the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones as part of a $50 million cash injection for Dunedin-based projects. This includes the revitalisation of the Hillside Workshops and rail system, the Dunedin waterfront, and funding for some privately owned technology companies. But Michael Woodhouse says the government has some explaining to do around the Hillside Workshop announcement.
The government needs to explain how, in the wake of Hillside Engineering being unsustainable for really a generation, what's going to be different when it's reopened. It's one thing to invest in the capital equipment that's required. It's another thing to make an engineering workshop sustainable over the long term.
Dunedin List MP Michael Woodhouse. Cable channel HBO has given the go-ahead for a prequel series in the hit fantasy TV show Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon will be set about 300 years before events in the original series, which ended its 8-season run earlier this year. The announcement came hours after another planned prequel due to star Naomi Watts was reportedly cancelled. Game of Thrones, it was HBO's most popular series. It won multiple Emmy Awards and drew tens of millions of viewers. It's just past 6:05. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has endorsed England's response to the haka during last week's Rugby World Cup semi-final. England fanned out across the pitch in V formation as the All Blacks delivered the challenge, with several players crossing the halfway line, standing their ground when officials tried to usher them back. World Rugby regulations state opponents must not cross the halfway line while the haka is being performed, and England have been fined, although the amount has not been revealed. Steve Hansen says he liked England's response.
It's not about responding, so you responded to the haka, so you got fined. It's actually you responded and you didn't. I think Joe didn't go back when he got told, 2 or 3 times, and but I thought the response was brilliant. If you understand the haka, then the haka requires a response. It's a challenge, so I thought it was brilliant. Quite imaginative too.
Meanwhile, Hansen has made 7 changes to the All Blacks starting 15 for their third-place playoff match against Wales on Friday night. Ben Smith, Ryan Crosby, Sonny Bill Williams, Rico Ioane, Dane Coles, Shannon Frizzell and Sam Cane will all start. In American baseball, the Washington Nationals have levelled the World Series against the Houston Astros at 3 games all with a 7-2 win today. And in cricket, Devon Conway has become just the second Wellington batsman to score a triple century, making 323 not out in his side's Plunket Shield cricket match against Canterbury at the Basin Reserve. The highest first-class score in New Zealand cricket was 385, made by Otago's late Bert Sutcliffe in 1952. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tegan is back at high school for the first time in 100 years. In episode 5 of our science fiction serial, When We Wake, Ryan Nakash speaks to us from New Delhi after his recent trip to the disputed territory of Kashmir, where he witnessed Indian Security Force treatment of the locals firsthand. And Debbie Stewart shares her love of raptors and falconry on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, Coromandel Peninsula and Central High Country. Partly cloudy, a few showers in the west, clearing tomorrow morning, then mainly fine weather. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine. Brief showers are possible tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, including Wairarapa. Cloud increasing with showers tonight, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Nelson mainly fine, but a shower or 2 is possible tonight. Marlborough, Canterbury and Otago, showers and strong southerlies spread north this evening, possibly heavy with hail and isolated thunderstorms. Mainly fine tomorrow, but a few showers for Otago and Banks Peninsula. Bulla, Westland, Fiordland and Southland, showers, heavy for a time tonight, snow lowering to 900 metres in Fiordland. Southwesterly gales about southern coasts tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, a few showers, rain tomorrow morning, possibly heavy with hail. RNZ National, it's coming up to 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. National Party leader Simon Bridges is making no apologies for taking a hard line on welfare. Today, floating a plan to cut off the benefits of those who don't get their kids immunised. Other policies in the party's just released discussion paper on social services include reinstating benefit sanctions on women who won't name the father of their child, bringing back targets to reduce the number of beneficiaries, and returning to Bill English's flagship policy of social investment. I spoke to Simon Bridges just before we came to air, and I asked what he'd be aiming to achieve with his welfare policy.
Well, I suppose there's two sides to a coin. One is to help the most vulnerable, but the other side of that coin and the harder-edged policies are actually about getting people off benefits, because we have a firm belief that people have better opportunities and better lives ultimately if they're not caught up in state dependency over the long term.
Where's the balance between carrot and stick in all of this then?
Well, there is a balance, and, I think the reality of our welfare policies is the balance for us will be somewhat closer to the stick than it is for the Labour Party, the Green Party. I couldn't sort of tell you exactly for the New Zealand Party, but we are nevertheless trying to get that balance, that fair go, as I say, between, on the one hand, that the safety net, which I think all New Zealanders understand is important, but on the other hand, that the desire not to have people on benefits for the long term is bad for them and it's bad for the hard-working taxpayer.
OK, let's drill down into where that balance is then. You would keep sanctions against sole parents who won't name the other parent. I'm wondering, how does that help the children in those families? How does that help raise them out of poverty and get a decent meal on the table?
I think ultimately it helps society, if you want to put it that way, because it makes quite clear that if you are a dad and you have had a child, you have obligations and responsibilities in relation to that. It doesn't
force them to pay, though, does it? By deducting income from the family they have left behind, it doesn't make them pay. Nothing about that forces them to pay.
I accept ultimately that can be the case, but what is also true is this is not an extreme policy. I accept that there are plenty of exceptions, actually, where it is unjust for the mother to be disclosing the situation. We get that, but I do think, in general terms, having a sanction, or as I think others have called them in the past, the deadbeat dad, is the right message for society.
But it doesn't achieve anything. Anne Tolley commissioned research while you were in government. It showed that sanctions of this nature put families at a higher risk of hardship and long-term welfare dependency, and there's no evidence to support that they change behaviours. So that's counter to your goal of raising people up, isn't it?
I think it does achieve, I hate to use a sort of an academic term here, but a normative goal, which is to make quite clear our values in relation to mums and dads and their responsibility. I think more broadly, sanctions definitely do work. And you can see that over the last couple of years, where the sanctions have come off. People are languishing longer on the dole queues in a time of very low unemployment. I think we've got 22,000 more on the job seeker support. I think the facts of the last couple of years under Labor actually show when you ease off on the mutual obligations and accountabilities, it does have an effect. People stay on the benefit longer.
OK, so you plan to introduce clear targets, your words, clear targets for reducing the number of people on benefits. So how much of a reduction do you want? 10%, 20%? What are you aiming for?
No, I'm not going to name those today. I assure you we will.
You said a clear target, so we're not clear on what your target is.
Well, I'll be clear about the clear target, I can assure you, before the election. But our process has been surveys, followed by discussion documents. We're effectively warming up the themes and proposing questions and the like. But I can tell you...
But you plan to have a target.
And I want you to know that, Lisa, before election day.
All right, so you'll be aware again that research commissioned while you were last in government showed that of the people who came off the benefit during a certain time period, 50% of them bounced back within 18 months because you didn't track where they were going, if they had a better life, if their situation improved. So just getting them off the benefit doesn't improve people's lot, does it?
Yes, Yeah, and look, I think you make a good point. I think this is why social investment, that other side of the coin, is so important. It's not just throwing money at an issue, as I think that the Labour Party and this government does. It's targeted investment where we think it'll make the difference. It's data and analytics to do exactly what you're saying, which is tracking people, making sure actually that they are better off in work, because I think for society to work overall, we need to have that situation. That's why in the document, for example, we are in favour of the abatements being a better position so that people are keeping more money when they do get
Let's talk about then. You talk about abatements. So in simple terms, the amount of money you can earn before the state takes away part of your benefit. So where is it at the moment for a job seeker, and how much would you allow them to earn more?
Well, I think at the moment, off the top of my head, you were talking about, given minimum wage rises and so on, literally 4 hours on the benefit, on the job seeker support benefit, at which point you then start being docked. You know, it does seem to me that's not enough. I'm not going to put a number on it today again. Yeah, I'm not going to put that number on it today, but we're making clear in this document that we do think it can be better than that. We do want to ensure that people feel the rewards of their labour.
If you don't think that is a fair amount, so you're saying at the moment people can work 4 hours, right? It's about $80 you can earn, $80 before they start to take money off your benefit. What should it be set at? The Welfare Advisory Group says it should be $150 a week. Are you with the Welfare Advisory Group on this one?
Well, if I listen to that and I say you go from 4 hours to at 150, you know, what is that, roughly 7 or 8 hours? There seems to be a logic in that. I can think of people in my wider family.
Sorry to interrupt, but I need to be clear about it. Sorry to interrupt, but I need to be clear. So you're agreeing with the Welfare Advisory Group that the Labour Party commissioned that like around $150 a week before you start losing your benefit is about right?
You say that, Lisa, like they deserve some credit for it. They commissioned a multi-million-dollar report. It then sat on the shelf for months, and they haven't done, I don't think, really any.
Forget the politics for a minute and think of the number. So you're saying that $150 is in the ballpark?
I'm accepting that there's a logic to what they're talking about. I'm certainly making clear to you, as we have in the document, we believe in it being more than it is today and people keeping the fruits of their labour feeling rewarded for their work. I'm not going to set a number on it today, though.
Okay. And one of the questions you pose in this policy document is this. For sole parents, should it be a requirement that their children are fully vaccinated? Why are you addressing that question or pointing it towards sole parents?
Well, I think simply because we're talking about people who receive taxpayers' money and in a situation where their child is not immunised.
Are sole parents less likely statistically to immunise their children? Do you have any information that suggests that?
No. I'm simply making the direct link between immunisation and someone who is on a benefit funded by people who've worked and paid taxes for that. And the simple proposition I would put, and you're right, in the document we're phrasing this as a question. In my mind, frankly, I'm rather clearer on this. That there is no good reason to not immunise your child in 2019, given that if you're not going to do it, I say, well, you shouldn't be receiving taxpayer funding, or certainly as much of it.
So zero benefit?
Those children, we want to see those children immunised.
So you'd rather see them starve?
Well, you know, the harm that comes from contracting measles, from potentially all the problems that go without that, the infection, as we're seeing in Northland, that spreads into an epidemic, those aren't things that I want to see in New Zealand.
And nobody will take away from the severe repercussions of a child having measles. But are you suggesting that if you do not immunise your child as a beneficiary, that you're going to go to zero funds from the government?
Today we're asking the question. I'm making a case to you that there is no good reason not to immunise, and I'm saying if you're not going to do that, actually, you know, should you be getting taxpayer money, do that on your own dime.
That's the National Party leader, Simon Bridges. Former Prime Minister Sybil English has slammed proposed rules around doctors who conscientiously object to abortions, saying they're abhorrent, disgraceful and unfair. He and his wife, Dr Mary English, appeared before the Abortion Legislation Committee this morning to lay out their concerns about a bill that would remove abortion from the Crimes Act. Their submissions became heated as they were challenged by Green MP Jan Logie and ACT leader David Seymour. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
Sybil English says this disgraceful piece of legislation gives the government unprecedented permission to discriminate against its employees.
This is abhorrent, and I cannot believe the Parliament is contemplating this.
The bill would allow for abortion up to 20 weeks without a medical test and after 20 weeks with a medical test based on the woman's physical and mental health and well-being. It also has a clause saying health workers who conscientiously object to abortions must tell a patient how to access the list of abortion service providers. Employers will also be able to refuse to employ or terminate the employment of conscientious objectors if accommodating their objection would unreasonably disrupt the employer's activities. Sir Bill says the law essentially allows DHBs to discriminate.
That is harassing them until they find the workplace so mentally distressing that they choose to leave. And this is the government giving itself permission to harass its own vulnerable workforce.
But Green MP and Justice Under-Secretary Jan Logie challenged whether that would happen in reality.
It's really hard to see that a large institution would be in a situation where a person could not be found to do other duties or would be impeding with the provision of care.
She says this is about balancing moral objections and the ability to give women proper care. But Sir Bill says it's not a fair balance to put the burden of ensuring access on individual health workers.
But this isn't balancing.
The community should have a right to be assured that they can access a fundamental service.
Freedom of conscience is clear and absolute. You can't balance it.
Dr Mary English told Ms Logie she thinks the government is being selective about when access to healthcare is important.
I used to work in the Lumsden Medical Centre when I was a rural GP, and it strikes me as ludicrous that we would say, well, yes, we've got to cover every angle, every woman's need here, but we are turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to women in rural areas and some of them are having to give birth on the side of the road.
Dr English says the bill could stop people with strong cultural or religious beliefs, such as Pacifica people, from joining the medical profession.
You talk about access and removing barriers. Let's not place huge barriers. You know, we talk about wanting something progressive and diverse, or this is going to make it very monochrome.
ACT leader David Seymour pointed to a submission MPs heard yesterday from a woman representing those who've had late-term abortions for medical reasons and the stigma they face. He says the things that have been said to her don't bear repeating.
And I wonder if you condone the kind of bullying and harassment that she's received, and if you can possibly see a connection between continuing to criminalise those women and the treatment that she's received in this community.
Sir Bill says he doesn't condone or take any responsibility for the terrible things said to her.
I hope you're not implying that having a view about this bill means having a view about that particular person, because it doesn't.
The Select Committee is continuing to hear submissions and is due to report back to the House by February next year. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
It's just gone 22 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As the reality of last Saturday's defeat sinks in for the All Blacks, hooker Dane Coles has broken down today when talking about his family. Many of the All Blacks have left family members back home, and earlier in the World Cup campaign, we heard from flanker Matt Todd about how tough that's been. But when Dane Coles was asked whether having his family with him in Japan helped to ease the loss, he was overcome with emotion.
No, it's been good. It's been real good having my family here, and I think the biggest thing for me is just the life experiences. I never went overseas till I was about 15, and my kids have actually come up. They got to go to Disneyland. My parents got to come. So, no, it's been good. Sorry. No, I didn't mean to cry either. It's been good, mate. It's been, obviously the result was crap, but it's been good to share that experience with my boys and my mum and dad. Yeah, it's been awesome to have them here. They're just normal people from Kapiti who got to go to Japan and watch their son in the World Cup, so it's been cool to share that experience with them.
The All Blacks play Wales in the bronze final this Friday night in Tokyo, and coach Steve Hansen has given the nod to several veteran players running out for the final time, including captain Kieran Reid, Sonny Bill Williams and Ben Smith. At today's press conference, another retiree, Ryan Crotty, said it was hard to watch his teammates from the sideline last week, and he plans to use the loss as motivation this Friday.
It was gutting watching from the sidelines. We're just going through all the same emotions as they were. You got to bottle that hurt and use it as emotion going forward. Just using that as motivation and the way I want to play this weekend.
And with all that controversy over the English team's response to the haka, the new-coming halfback Brad Weber said he had no problem with England's flying V.
I didn't have any qualms with it. I didn't see it as disrespectful or anything, so, they can do whatever they like, but, the haka is about us, it's not about them. It's about us connecting with our people, with each other.
Brad Weber. And Friday's match kicks off at 10 p.m. New Zealand time. Spark has allowed TVNZ to screen the game, but there will be a 1-hour delay. Otago is the latest region to receive a major injection from the Provincial Growth Fund in a bid to revitalise the rail system, the Dunedin waterfront and bring more jobs. The nearly $60 million investment has been widely welcomed and heralded as a game changer. Otago Southland reporter Tess Brunton has more.
Peter Buckley started working for Kiwi Rail 25 years ago and narrowly missed losing his job in 2012 when the Hillside workshop closed.
There were a lot of people that they had fathers, grandfathers, uncles, brothers that had all worked at rail. For them it was, some people likened it to like a death.
Now close to $20 million has been pledged to help get the workshop back on track. The money will go to upgrading the main workshop buildings, overhauling the mechanical plant and increasing Kiwi Rail's services at Hillside. Kiwi Rail's David Gordon says the big investment is worth it.
We can't spend 100,000 here, 100,000 there and hope to make anything of a big site. So you've got to have the initial seed capital in there. We'll need to find partners to really develop this site properly, but you won't get partners unless they're seeing you as being ready to invest as well. So it's the opportunity to do it properly, I guess, would be the best way to put it.
David Gordon says he hopes that within the next 10 years they could be back to having around 100 people working at the site again. Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones, who announced the funding, says the changes should last a century.
Some of the buildings, I should imagine, do need to be demolished. I was half expecting Oliver Twist to run out from under one of the buildings. And I know there's a lot of philanthropy and old-time attitudes down here, but I'd like to see some of these buildings certainly replaced for the next 100 years.
Close to $8 million in additional PGF funding was announced for engineering and manufacturing projects, which should create 80 permanent jobs. Trade and Export Growth Minister David Parker says he hopes the mix of projects will revive Dunedin's long history as an engineering hub.
Dunedin has an industrial heart that goes back to the gold rush days, steamship companies, manufacturing of trains. But you've got to update the technologies that are used in engineering, and this enables those industries to thrive going into the future.
Waiata greeted the large crowd at the Dunedin Centre as the second series of funding injections were unveiled this afternoon. Dunedin's ambitious waterfront project, with its cockleshell-inspired cultural centre, received the biggest slice of the funding at $19.9 million. Dunedin councillor David Benson-Pope says it will be a boon for the future of the city.
For too long, that part of the harbour has not realised its potential. We know there's a strong desire out there for this area to be developed. We see that in support during our annual plan processes, and that's why the city has made such a strong push to request government investment in this part of Dunedin.
On top of that, there's $10 million aimed at turning the city into a digital hub, with a focus of growing the video gaming sector at the Centre of Digital Excellence, or CODE. Its working group chairman, Murray Strong, says the investment means Dunedin doesn't just revive old industry, but forges into new ones.
New Zealand has a long tradition of food, fibre, tourism and hospitality. However, code and its digital technology and gaming foundations represent a new paradigm and are not in any way limited by geography. In reality, they're weightless and scalable beyond any physical limitations.
The government hopes a $63,000 investment will help to train Otago High School students to work in forestry. Newly elected Dunedin City Mayor Aaron Hawkins says it's a huge day for the city.
The biggest single investment in economic development in the city in generations from central government across a wide range of industries. It's back to the future at Hillside Workshops, celebrating the future of the video game industry with the Centre of Digital Excellence, putting spades in the ground and starting phase 1 of the waterfront redevelopment project.
While shovels may not be in the ground just yet, there's certainly excitement in Dunedin at the massive cash injection and the jobs that could come from it. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, Tane.
And in news just a hand from Samoa, Samoa's government says 3 people, 2 babies and an adult are suspected to have died of measles. The government has ordered all preschools to close until further notice as it deals with the epidemic. That's almost all we've got time for this evening, but one last piece of feedback about the English being fined in response to crossing the line during the haka. Perhaps admiration for the English response to the All Black haka could be made manifest by New Zealand Rugby paying half the fine imposed on the enterprising Poms. That from Hamish in Martin. Thanks for listening this evening. Don't forget you can go online and check out all our picture stories and news and our webpage.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A tip-off from a confidential informant has helped uncover Epicurean Dairy Limited's deliberate failures to report positive listeria results. Auckland Action Against Poverty has denounced National's hardline approach to social welfare as beneficiary bashing. An Auckland businessman who stole about $1.5 million from elderly people has been sent to jail for nearly 7 years. And the Samoan government has ordered all preschools to close until further notice, as 3 people, 2 babies and an adult, are suspected to have died of measles. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7 o'clock.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
They ended up bringing in police horses as well. We're hearing reports that there were actually at one stage more police horses and police officers than actual protesters.
Live with local, national and international stories and a slice of creativity.
Shem Phillips is one that's been really, really successful. He's got several games.